The theme of this program is communities organizing for good governance and accountability. How does it relate to what you're doing?
Well, Citizens for Global Solutions strategically promotes U.S. engagement in international organizations to solve global problems. So because this is our goal, we work to be able to have good access to our members of Congress, to our senators, to the White House and the other parts of our U.S. government, to be able to talk about what are the needs of not only this country but throughout the world in terms of being able to have better cooperation. So we think cooperation is essential to be able to solve global challenges, to build a better and safer world. So for us, transparency and openness means being able to have a two-way conversation, and it also means to be able to support those lawmakers who support our goals and support our values and to understand who they are and what they stand for.
Thank you. You are a global outfit. If United States is found accountable, how does it rub off on other nations? Are you interested in that?
When you say if the United States is found accountable, what do you mean?
How are you interested in the global implication or just United States? Yeah.
Sure. The United States, we're very interested in the global scenario. That's what we're about. But the United States is such a strong player at the United Nations, at the International Monetary Fund, and at these other international organizations that U.S. policy, what we support, what we don't support, what treaties do we ratify, what human rights do we follow and respect, is very, very important. So our job as an organization is really to get the best policy and the best action and the best behavior out of our government as possible. So it is very, very important what the international community thinks, but it's, from our perspective, very important how the United States acts and behaves. So because we have this accountability within our country, we have our elections on every 2 years, so if people are not really following the right values, we have an opportunity to get in lawmakers who will.
Okay. Well, what's the global implication?
The global implication is how well do nations cooperate? Are we all playing with the same set of rules, laws, norms? You know, we have this web of international laws and institutions that have developed, and it talks about what happens with weapons of mass destruction, what happens to address a pandemic or a famine or a tsunami. How do we deal with these big global problems that it doesn't matter how big a country you are, it takes a lot of countries working together to solve them. And to have good policy, you need good governance. And to be able to have that good governance, you need to be able to hold your lawmakers in your country accountable. And that's our job here in the United States. So we do a service not only for the United States, but for the world as well, by making this big, powerful country a good player and a good citizen of the world.
Okay. How do you do that? What are the strategies you have on ground?
Well, we work at a number of different levels. Our members around the country, first off, work with their particular individual local senators and representatives, visit with them, talk with them, write letters. So on one hand, the people who vote are members of Congress in and out. We make sure that those members understand that their constituents care about these issues. So that's one piece of it. Here in Washington, we set up coalitions of like-minded organizations. We have a Washington Working Group on the International Criminal Court, the Partnership for Effective Peacekeeping. We lead task forces on ratifying certain treaties like the CEDAW, the Women's Treaty, or the International Criminal Court, or the Law of the Sea. These are all very important pieces of international law that we bring together many, many different actors and many different organizations to work together and coordinate. Then our staff will go up to the Hill, up to Congress, and talk individually with members of Congress and their staff. And in addition to that, we get involved in the elections of our members of Congress. We have what's called a Political Action Committee. Now, this is a committee which takes funds contributed by our members, and we can help identify members of Congress candidates that we want to support for election or help defeat for election. And we'll put our money where our mouth is. We will go and those that we understand so will support us, we will try to back them. Now, we have a couple of tools that we use to figure this out. We have our congressional report card where we grade members of Congress. They get an A, they get a B, they get an F, depending upon how they vote on issues that we feel are important. And we publish this, and we send it out around the country, and we put it on the internet. We also have candidate questionnaires where we ask a candidate, will you support ratification of this treaty, full funding for the United Nations, peacekeeping operation? So, you know, different issues, you know, will you support development funds? And so we'll find out where they stand on these issues, and then based upon how they vote for those who are already in Congress and how they say they will vote for those who are not yet in, we can determine which are the ones to support. You know, we think that the openness found here in the United States and our U.S. systems of government is very, very important, and it's something that we would like to see transferred even more so to the international system. It's not enough just to happen here in this particular country, but we think it's a set of values that really deserve to be looked at across the globe.
Why are you passionate about this?
Well, let me tell you how I got involved with this. I was a businessman. I worked in Atlanta, Georgia. I had a partner. We had about 100 employees, and we sold products for copy machines, and we had offices in Atlanta and Savannah and Jacksonville, Florida. And I started looking at how our world was going. I was looking at our population trends. I was looking at nuclear weapons. I was looking at the environment. And you know, I saw this graph of the population where we went from the very beginning of history to the 1850s to get to 1 billion people. And then from the 1850s to the 1940s to get to 2 billion, and the 1940s to, well, back then in the 80s to get to about 6 billion. And I looked at that graph and I said, if this was my business, I would either be very happy or very scared. And I wanted to do something about it. I got involved with this organization as a volunteer. And one of the first things that I did is I went to my member of Congress, and we were asked to do this, and I asked her if she would write a letter to the president, that was then President Clinton, and the Secretary of State and Defense, and supporting the U.S. involvement with the International Criminal Court to address war criminals. And she said, well, if you'll write the letter, I'll put it on my letterhead. And I did. I wrote the letter, she put it on the letterhead, and there was a letter written by me on the letterhead of a member of Congress going to the President of the United States, and I said, wow, I could help make a difference here. And I decided I liked selling peace a whole lot more than I liked selling paper. And that's how I got involved and started working on this, and it was the best decision I've ever made. There is so much to be done. You know, we've come so far since the 1940s when we started the United Nations, but we have so much further to go in our world to really have a much safer, more secure world for all of our children.
Can you tell us about your successes, where it relates to political, governance? You know?
Sure. Just a few of them. One of the things that we worked on just last year was ratification of the New START Treaty. Now, this is a treaty that would reduce the number of nuclear warheads that both U.S. has and Russia has together to a level lower than when I was born in the mid-1950s. Okay? It really dramatically reduced the number of warheads. And so we were able to use our grassroots networks in very specific states where the senators were on the fence and hadn't decided, to be able to help push them over on the side of supporting this, because you need 2/3 of the Senate to ratify it. We were able to use our staff here in Washington, working with a big, broad coalition to help get it over the edge. So it was the combination of being able to have the relationships and have the members that were able to us to make the political difference. Another example is recently a member of Congress just was able to, wrote an op-ed, an editorial on why the U.S. needs to pay its dues to the United Nations. Well, this is a member of Congress that we supported in his campaign and were able to build a very good friendly relationship with. And so we asked him to do this, and he did it. And it was because we built that political relationship, and because we have this very open and transparent system that allows us to do that.
Okay, but can you be a little bit more specific? I'm particularly interested in accountability in governance.
Okay.
So, can you tell us where you have succeeded in that regard?
Sure. And accountability in governance means that our lawmakers and our officials are doing the job and they're the right people for the job. A number of years ago, at that point, President Bush was in the White House, and he wanted to have as our ambassador to the United Nations a fellow by the name of John Bolton. Now, this very same fellow had said at one point that there is no such thing as the United Nations. He said if you took off the top 10 floors of the United Nations building, the UN has 38 floors, if you lopped off the top 10, it wouldn't make a lick of difference. Now, we said that this should not be our representative to the UN. Well, we happen to have videotape of this man saying these things. And because we have a pretty open, transparent system, we had this videotape, and we were able to show it to our senators. And as a result, when the Senate voted on giving this man a permanent job at the UN, the Senate did not support that. And it makes a difference, and it was a combination of all the different pieces. Our members here in Washington, the political work we do, and the ability to have this kind of two-way conversation with our lawmakers.
Sorry, I wanted to say, why are you concerned with government performance? I think that's a better way of phrasing it. Why are you really concerned?
Well, from our perspective, because we believe that international cooperation is essential to solve global challenges, we need a government that pays attention to this. And if they don't pay attention to it, if they don't focus on cooperation with other countries, working within international institutions, then you have the kind of country that could be a bully. You have the kind of country that could really make decisions in the short term and not the long term. And that make decisions based upon what certain greedy interests want, as opposed to what's good for people not only here in this country, for around the world. Because when it comes to our environment, when it comes to nuclear weapons, when it comes to all of these large global problems, we have to work together, and that means being able to have a government that pays attention to this. So for us, accountability is very, very important. If you had a situation where there were a bunch of folks in government that only cared about lining their pockets, they didn't care what happened to the kids, they didn't care what happened to people in other countries, we would have a world that was much poorer than the world that we have today, and a world that was much more dangerous than the world we have today. And we could do this better than we are doing. So our goal is to be able to improve it and make it more effective, have more cooperation.
Okay, thank you. Do you experience some challenges in the course of this?
Well, there's always challenges when you're dealing with large institutions like the United Nations, when you're dealing with large groups of people who have many different perspectives and priorities. Those who are more concerned about what's going to be good for them back in their state, or what's going to be good for their particular business, or many other different factors. We live in a very, very diverse country. So of course we get opposition. We get opposition from those who feel we're better off with using gunboat diplomacy, have a big stick and use it, than working together. So of course we have, we come into opposition, but we find that by working together, by pulling cooperation together, by training, by giving information, by really letting people see how government works, to understand what's in legislation, all of these pieces, that we are more successful.
Thank you very much.